This segment is the demonstration of the making of an armature for the portrait bust assignment. In the first part of the semester, we're going to learn about measuring, scale, proportion, and formal balance. In other words, symmetry. We're also going to learn some things about anatomy, because the portrait bust is the head, neck, and shoulders of a portrait. This maquette, a maquette is a model, a working model. That's the word for a working model. This working model is made abstract to simplify the structures of the head, neck, and shoulders. Your job in this compulsory part of the assignment is to make your piece of clay the size and shape of this piece of clay, using a solid armature that you're going to build clay solid on this armature. So to begin with, you'll need a drill motor, you'll need a hammer, pliers, a marker, masking tape, clothespins, a monkey wrench or a channel locks, half-inch flange and threaded plumbing, and a 12 by 12 plywood board. The armature wire you'll purchase in the bookstore when you are there getting your sculpture kit. The sculpture kit is for both Art 17 and the 3D Foundations class, both for the beginning sculpture class and for your class, the 3D Foundations course. So let's begin. I'm going to take my drill motor and some wood screws. I'm going to put my half-inch flange in the center of my 12-inch board. I always put the screw on the drill motor before I place it on the board, and then you give it a little tap at the top. The drill motor is a variable speed drill. That means it's got a throttle on it, just like your car. So you start out slow and work your way in. If you just go from 0 to 60, it'll growl and strip the screws. One beginner mistake that's often made at this early point is trying to put the plumbing on the flange before you've mounted it. Now, if you do that, the plumbing's going to get in the way of your tool. So just don't do that. Start with the flange. That'll make your life easier. Now I'm going to screw my plumbing on, and another beginner mistake is forgetting to tighten it down before they go to the next step. You won't be doing that. You'll be using a channel locks or a monkey wrench to tighten that down before you start the next step. I'll give you a handout that has a photograph of the contour of the armature wire that you're going to bend. You'll cut 2 lengths of armature wire. You'll use this drawing to help you decide how long to cut it also. Now, you'll want them to be as close to identical as possible. And this photograph is very helpful in accomplishing that. Now, the next, there's an important detail involved here. This length from the loop is about 4 inches. You're going to want 2 inches inside and 2 inches exposed. That's a very important detail that you're going to want to make sure. So as you're putting these 2 armature wires in there, you'll want to leave 2 inches of this length exposed because you're going to later tilt the bale forward to create the angle of the neck of the portrait bust. The next thing to do is dismantle one of these wooden clothespins. They are going to act like we're going to wedge the clothespin into the empty areas between the armature wire. That will forward the securing of the armature. And it usually takes a couple of these. If this is in the way, just bend it out of the way so you can give it a good lick with the hammer. One thing that I've noticed is people who are unfamiliar with using a hammer will put their hand way up here thinking they'll be able to control it better and just drive everybody nuts. So another measure that you can take to secure the bale is to add another screw in any of the gaps. So I've used the wedge, this wedge, and I've used a screw. And the aim of this is to get this absolutely motionless when you tug on it. So I've tightened down the plumbing, secured the bale. Now it's time to fill this with newspaper. Okay. Another beginner mistake is not jamming enough newspaper in here. You want to have this all enclosed so that clay, when you apply it, doesn't get in and get a chance to grab behind the wire bale. So to do that, you have to fill this with newspaper. You have masking tape in your toolkit, and you're going to use this to simply round up the newspaper so it remains contained. Then you're going to take an indelible marker and you're going to make a mark in the center of all 4 sides. We're going to call these crosshatches, or what's they call it in the crosshairs. These are crosshairs, making the center of the board the target. When you're applying clay, you won't be able to see the armature, and these will help assist you in visualizing that. And then you also want to mark F for the front, because you're going to tilt the bale toward the front to start the angle of the neck. Now we're going to move to a stand, a sculpture stand that allows you to be able to see your project at eye level while you're building the piece with clay. Some of the tools you'll need for this project, you'll have to go to the hardware store to get, or go online. Going online, it means you need to plan ahead to give time for it to, for delivery time. One of the important tools you're going to have by the time we start this is a turntable or Lazy Susan, and it needs to be the heavy-duty metal kind that's 12 inches in diameter. The smaller ones don't work. Plastic ones don't work. And the purpose of them is so that you can be turning your project as you work. The stand isn't really designed for turning. It'll just make a squeaky sound and drive all your classmates crazy. So now the purpose of the stand is to get your project up to a working area where you can see almost at eye level what you're doing. If you work on the countertops, you're looking downward at your project the whole time, which in turn makes your project look up at you. So your project's going to be looking up, and we're not going to do it that way. So the clay, and the other important tool you're going to purchase, this one is available in the bookstore, is the Sculpture House. What's the actual term? Sculpture House wire end tool. It looks like this. It's got this. There's a spoon side and a curved side. You will not be using the curved side. You'll just use the spoon side, and this, of course, is the taking away side. I'll give you some pointers on how to actually use that tool once we get started. So as I apply the clay, I might be better if it's here. When I apply the clay in the first go, I'm going to grab about the size, a ball of clay about the size of my palm. So that this is a efficient amount. I've seen beginners blob on big hunks of clay all at once, thinking that that's going to be more efficient, or they'll get through that step sooner. And that actually what it does is it creates more trouble than it's worth. So the amount of clay that you put on at a time is important. So try to visualize putting an even amount of clay all the way around the armature, so that when you're making measurements, it doesn't start drifting to one side or the other. You want to keep the armature in the center as much as possible. This clay is fresh enough that it will stick to itself. So you don't need to, sometimes I see people taking a spray bottle and getting it wet. Water is not necessary. This clay is plenty moist to stick to itself. So that, if you have that inclination, just don't do that. Another tool that you'll need to have handy is a caliper. A caliper is a measuring tool. I'm going to give you some pointers on how to measure. The first measurement that I'm going to use is for the base, to get the shape of the base right. So I'm going to show you this maquette to indicate, for starters, all clay sculpture has to be hollow. So what's going to happen is we're going to build this project, and then let it dry until it's leather hard. Leather hard is a state where the clay is still malleable enough to model, but strong enough to hold its own shape. So we'll cut your project off of the armature, scoop it out, and then reassemble it so that it's hollow. Otherwise, steam will build up too quickly in the kiln when it's fired, and the steam will blow it up. So notice that the base is square, or almost square, and it's got, four relatively flat sides. That's the first measure that you're going to want to look for. There's going to be, in order to keep this from looking like a soldier, you'll want the neck to tilt forward on the piece. So if you'll notice how there's quite a bit of clay forward on the face in relation to the base in the front, and quite a bit of clay in the back on the base away from the front. So that's going to be a measure that you can use to figure out how much clay to put in the front versus how much clay to put in the back. So in the beginning, as you're applying the clay, you want to keep your focus on the measures of the base in order to prevent what I call soldier or drifting. So soldier is when the posture of the head is right over the shoulders, making it look like a soldier standing at attention, which is not a natural position. And that's why they say at ease, then, you know, the neck relaxes at an angle. So if you measure from the front of the clay base to the board, I'm going to put my hand down there. It's the width of my hand in the front. So in this way, the clay on the front of the face is over the chest. In the back, if I put 3 fingers down in the back, then you can see that there's more mass on the board in the back than in the front. Another way to visualize this is by getting a straight edge. I'm going to use the modeling tool as a straight edge. And you'll notice that if I put this here, there's quite a bit of distance between the tool and the front and the chest in the front. And there's no distance in the back. As a matter of fact, the distance now is in the back of the head in relation to the tool. Another measuring tool that you'll want to have handy is the caliper. Now the caliper, you can measure with the caliper crossed over like this. So this would be one way to use the caliper to measure. Or reverse it like this so it's like a C or a clip. That's better for large measures, like if you're going to measure how tall you want your project. So and it's important to tighten this wing nut, otherwise, you know, you'll measure it and then it'll change and it's of no use. So the next thing I want to focus on is how to use your tools. There's only so much you're going to be able to do with your hands. See how blobby and dobby the clay project is right now in comparison to the precision of our prototype. There comes a point, and it's right about at this point, that your hands are not going to be precise enough. So at this stage, your hands are good for delivery. That means getting the clay from the bag onto the project, but it's not good for modeling. So the sculpture tool, again, I'm going to use the spoon side of the tool to model, not the curved side. And it's a rocking and shoving action like this. So I'm going to hold out my fingers and we get a close-up. So you can see, if you look closely, you can see how the tool is tugging my skin as I rock and shove like that. That's a very different action than this kind of thing, like I call this cake decorating. And most students learning how to use this tool will use the tool like they're decorating a cake, and as you can see, that doesn't really accomplish anything. It's also not a paddle. Paddling with this tool is just a waste of time. So you'll be doing 3 things at once in this project by this time. You're going to be measuring the size of the base in relation to the board. you're going to be measuring the proportions of the relationship between the shoulders, the neck, and the head. You'll be learning about the properties of the clay, how it sticks to itself, and it's easier to model with a tool than with your hands. We're going to learn about how it gets stiffer as it dries and changes properties. And then you'll also be learning how to actually use the tool. And this is the kind of the self-taught part. When you're using the tool, I can show you what not to do with the tool, but you have to just experiment and fuss with it a little bit to actually get the tool to work for you. And your job is to just move the clay into a position that makes your piece of clay look like this piece of clay. Now, an important thing to note about clay at this point is that this prototype has been bisque fired to a porous, it's not clay anymore, it's ceramic now. That makes it durable enough for me to use. But when you fire clay, it shrinks anywhere from 10 to 15%. So this piece of clay is going to need to be 10 or 15% larger than that if it's going to end up that size. So what that means is this shows us the correct proportions, but it's actually not the right size. It's 10% smaller than your project will be. So as we get closer to the dimensions of the head, neck, and shoulders, your tool is always going to be more precise than your hands. So as you can see, I'm moving the clay and creating a kind of plane, a curved plane here in the front. And the corner here has kind of fallen off, so I need to add an amount of clay there in the corner so that I can make a turn here with my tool. So there's an actual corner here. Most beginners overlook that very essential sort of geometry that's needed for the base. The end point, I'm calling these end points here and here, is just where the sculpture ends. The end point needs to be featureless. When I say featureless, I mean not having any dimples, dips, or weaves or anything like that. So I'm going to fill in enough clay with my hand and then use the tool again with the curved spoon part to create a featureless endpoint like that. So that needs to happen in the back also. And then, now we can get our caliper out. Now that the base has been established, using the measures I showed you, we can make better choices about proportions of the neck and head. So it's really important to do the base first, because all of your other decisions are going to be based on the base. So now, some measurements that I could take is how tall the end point is from of the shoulder in relation to the base. So again, you could use your calipers for that. You can measure that here and here. Symmetry is, another word for symmetry is formal balance. We want both sides of your project to be balanced in a symmetrical way. So if I measure this high on this side, I'm naturally going to want to measure that much on that side so that it's symmetrical. Another way to apply symmetry or measure symmetry is with key lines. And now if you've taken a figure drawing class, you've heard that term before. Key lines are basically a map, a way of mapping out the regions of the project, a lot like a topographer maps out latitude and longitude on a map. So if I step back, when I'm doing a key line, I want to use the full length of my arm and the full length of my tool away from the piece so that I can see on either side of the piece at the same time with my peripheral vision. So if you're putting key lines in like this, you're not going to get results. You need to step back to do that. So as I put this key line in, I'm noticing right away that there's more clay on this side than there is on that side. And when I put a vertical key line here, I can see that the head tilts significantly forward in the front than in the back. Those are important places to see. The next thing I'm noticing along those lines is when I look at the top of this prototype, notice that the top of the head is way back here behind the ears, and you can see that I've marked with key lines so that I can see that. A lot of beginners will not notice that, and it'll be all slopey in the back and too high in the front. Another thing to notice, one of the things we learn from doing the portrait bust is that the human head is definitely not round. Charlie Brown's head is round, but yeah, we're doing a portrait likeness of a human. So if you'll look at the top of this human skull, you can see that it's egg-shaped. Wide here, narrow, wide in the back, narrow in the front. And if you look at the skull in profile, you'll see that the top of the head is behind the ears and sloping downward to the front or downward to the back. So our maquette, as I said earlier, has been simplified. Detail has been removed in order to capture the essence of the planes of the geometry and geography of the human head. So when I say geometry, I mean these are like planes that converge at different junctions, and these have key lines to kind of indicate where things belong, like the ear lands on a key line and so on. And then you'll remember the neck is at a diagonal to the shoulders and head. And so if the back of the head is way up here, the front of the head is way down here. So the neck needs to be treated like it's a cylinder. So I'm going to use again my tool to create a cylindrical neck by using that rocking and shoving action. And as I do that, I start to notice where the apex of the curve is in the back, which is way up here. Oh, when I say apex, what I mean is on a curve, the highest point or the widest point is the apex. So between my elbow and my wrist, this is the apex of that curve. From the front of the head to the back of the head, this is the apex of the curve. From the side view, the back of the head is the apex of the curve is way up here. The apex of the curve in the front is on the nose. So I'm revealing that as I make this neck more of a cylinder shape. Now I'm starting to notice, for instance, how far the bottom of the chin is from the board that it's mounted on. That would be a good measure to take at this point. You'll want your chin to be the same distance from the board as the one that I'm making. So in the lab portion of this class, I'm going to be making one of these again, while you're making yours, and you'll be able to take measures of the kind I'm talking about from the project that I'm making to help you along and keep you from getting lost. And don't be surprised if I come and show you something like, oh, your clay's drifting. Well, how do I know that? Well, I'll stick my tool into the piece until I hit the armature, then I'll measure that. And then I'll come over here and stick the clay into the piece here, and if it's more, that means it has drifted over. That's one of the ways to get symmetry and keep the armature in the center of your project. This compulsory part of the assignment is actually, in many ways, an abstraction of the human head, neck, and shoulder. Because what I'm doing is simplifying the shapes into planes. And I'm going to warn people about the use of the word plane. When we think of that word, we usually think of a flat, like the, like the playa out there in the desert. A plane is a flat thing. There's no flat things on a human head. There's this plane and this plane kind of come together down the center here, but they are curved. So as you're modeling, again, you need to do that rocking and shoving action to get that kind of curvature. And it's important to continuously apply key lines so that you are mapping out the symmetry of the piece. So a vertical key line, this is a vertical key line. That's an example. A horizontal key line. When I'm doing a horizontal key line, I'm looking at the top of the head, which is up here, and the bottom of the chin, which is over there, and I'm splitting the difference. Most people, beginning, will put the horizontal key line too far up, and it'll make the nose too long and the forehead smashed. So notice, from the top of the head to under the chin, it's halfway. There's this sort of cliche that we think of with artists, they wear a beret and smoke, and they do this a lot, all right? Well, forget the beret, forget the cigarette, but keep this part, because this is how you can measure the proportions between the key lines. So what I'm doing is I'm sighting the bottom of my thumb to the top of the tool, and if it's similar, that's a way of judging proportion. But you can't do that without key lines. So this is the mapping out measure that you can take. So another handout that you're going to get shows the geography of where features land on the face. So this is going to be very helpful, and what I'm going to do right now is break this down into stages. If you'll notice, the first stage is marked here, 1/2, and the key line goes straight through the center of the face. Notice that the eyes land right on that key line. So here you see that I've done this horizontal key line congruent with this diagram. So the next breakdown that we're going to look at is the thirds. So over here on the side you say 1, 2, 3. The planes of the face are going to be very important in helping you see how that breakdown of thirds works, because, for instance, the plane of the forehead and the plane of the top of the head and the plane of the side of the head all converge here at this corner and this corner. And to do the thirds measure, you'll need to measure from the brow, from the forehead to the brow, and from the brow to the bottom of the nose, from the bottom of the nose to the chin. So I'll begin with creating an up plane of the cheeks and a down plane of the brow right on that horizontal key line. So this lands, the turn between the cheeks and the brow land right on the horizontal key line, halfway from the top and the bottom. Now, the up plane of the cheek takes up a large part of the face, like at least a third or more of the face down below that key line. Notice also that the brow has a curvature to it. And I'm accomplishing that by that rocking and shoving action with my tool. Most beginners just push the tool straight in, and the brow appears like the bumper on a bus. It looks all frontal and flat. So it's really important for you to notice that on a human head, all of these planes have a curvature to them. So this plane is out this way, and this plane is out that way, not straight forward. The next thing that it needs is what I call the conical key line, which I've indicated here. It starts again at the brow, narrow, and gets wider and wider and ends at the chin and jaw. So that's what we're going to call the conical key line. That's what needs to be applied next before I add a nose. And the reason I do it before I add a nose is otherwise the nose gets in the way. Now, as soon as I put that in, I start to notice detail that's missing that need to be added. So, for instance, there really isn't a sufficient amount of clay here for the chin, the dome of the chin. So I added a little bit of clay there for the dome of the chin to make it very vivid and visible. The nose is a very simplified, sort of universal shape, a kind of cone. So I'm going to keep that very simple. I want to keep it simple because right now it's just a placeholder for judging the proportions of other features. So I'm just going to make this very simple shape. Most beginners make the nose too big or too long. So try to notice, make note of the size of the nose that I'm at. Yeah, see, that's way too big. So I'm going to have to pare that down. There, that's better. Okay, so now we can measure thirds because we have a very visible forehead, a very visible brow, a very visible nose, and chin. So in drawing, when an artist puts their thumb up on the tool like this, they call this the sighting stick. So you're going to use this tool as a sighting stick, and you're going to measure from the top of the tool to the top of your thumb in relation to the thirds that you've applied. So I'm going to put a third line at the at the forehead, a third line at the brow, a third line at the nose. And I'm going to step back and see, by using my sighting stick, if they're equal before I go to the next step. Now, another thing to notice when it's time to apply the clay for eyes, there's these vertical lines marked 1, 2, 3. And if you'll notice, it's broken up into thirds, and there's enough room in the middle for another eye. So that's a really important measure that's indicated on this diagram when it's time to apply the eyes. If you put them too close together, the character looks sinister. If you put them too far apart, they look like a cow. So that's really important to note. The next third is for deciding where the chin and the parting line of the mouth goes. And you can see once again, it's divided 1, 2, 3. And so we're going to divide the lower part of the face into thirds, starting with the dome of the chin is 1/3, the parting line of the mouth is the 2nd third, and the bottom of the nose is the 3rd third. So here's the dome of the chin that you can see here. Here's the bottom of the nose, you can see there. Now I need to split the difference between this third and this third to make to locate where the parting line is of the mouth. Most beginners put the parting line too low because they think it's halfway, and it's not. It's 1/3 of the way. At this point, your large modeling tool is too large. So we're going to scale back to this tool, which I call a wire loop tool, and this tool I call the popsicle stick, because it looks like a popsicle stick, only it's got a flat edge or a blade on this side. I'm going to start by opening up a wedge for the mouth, so that there's an actual inside-out quality to the mouth. The next thing I'm going to do with this popsicle stick is I'm going to push the clay back at the cheeks along that conical key line that I drew on the diagram and I drew here on the project. So by pushing the cheeks back along that key line, now I've got some dimension out forward for the mouth. Most beginners forget to do this step, push the clay back there, and the mouth starts looking flat like the bumper on a car. So, think about it. There's teeth. There's an assembly of teeth that are on a curvature, and your lips are stretched over that curve. This definitely needs to have a roundness to it to be convincing. So now that I've created that, I'm going to move the bottom lip in and the top lip in so that it has more dimension. And then there's this important detail called a philtrum. You can use the back of the spoon side of the popsicle stick tool to create that philtrum there. And then again, I'm going to use a rocking and shoving action to contour further the inside out of the lips. Now, here's where symmetry gets to be really important. If I'm just working from one side of the piece, it's going to get lopsided. If you look closely, you can see that the parting line of the lip drifted downward on the right and upward on the left. One of the reasons we work on a sculpture stand and we never sit down to do this project is so that you can do this simple thing. Step back and look at what you've got. And as soon as I step back arm's length from my project, I can see that the lips are tilted like that, and I just respond by, coming back and reorganizing it so that they're symmetrical. So, yeah, when you get to the lab portion of this class, you're going to be hearing me say again and again, you can't do this project sitting down because you can't step back and look what you're doing if you're sitting down. Just basic body mechanics. Okay, so I'm going to stop here to give people a chance to reach this point before we go into the more detailed parts like eyes, ears. You know, before I stop, I'm going to put the placeholder for the ears so that I can complete the idea of the usefulness of key lines. So the ear, the opening of the ear, where the hearing part of your ear is right on the junction of the horizontal and vertical key lines. And most of the ear is behind that key line, like that. So you'll want to first make the horizontal and vertical key lines, then put a kind of diagram about where the size and shape and location of the ears. And then you want to push in a little bit, because your ears actually sit in a recess between the back of your head and the side of your jaw. So if you don't do that recess, and you put the ears on, they look like they're sitting on something instead of being integrated into the form. And modeling the ear is a very simple thing. You just model the clay around your thumb, and it'll make a kind of ear shape pretty quickly and easily. And just like with the nose, most beginners use too much clay for the ear. So you're going to want to measure. Actually get your caliper and maybe measure from the project I'm doing to give you an idea how much clay to use for the ear.